and thank you for joining today's Acquisition Seminar hosted by the Federal Acquisition Institute. Today's seminar, entitled Learning and Development Across Generations, will offer valuable insight and useful information on learning and development and how the generations of the federal workforce inform learning and development efforts. We obviously have a blended workforce when it comes to generations. Baby boomers, Generation X, Millennials, and whatever the succeeding generation is going to be labeled. Learning and development efforts need to engage people across those generations to ultimately ensure the creation of a qualified workforce meeting the organizational mission. The goal of this seminar is to share perspectives and practices of learning and development in the federal workforce and to illustrate what is being done to engage the generations. Those answering the call to this endeavor are Carly Skelly, Department of Agriculture, Joel and Jarrett, Small Business Administration, Sharon Writing, Environmental Protection Agency, Jeffrey Vargas, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and Marianne Wangerman, University of Virginia. Let's hear from them now.
I think most employees are interested in learning and development, but sometimes they really don't know where to go or how to get started. So one way to prepare them is to really help them understand that in the federal government they can have an amazing career journey and that learning and development is part of that. Help them understand the types of resources that are available at entry level, at mid-level, at late career. Help them understand that they have options, ways to go. Maybe they're interested in becoming a technical expert. Maybe they're interested in becoming a supervisor or a leader. It depends on what they're interested in and how they want their career to go as to what kinds of learning resources and learning options they should take.
I think just having a culture of learning. Learning is not an event, or it shouldn't be an event. It really should be a practice. It should be something that we use and apply. And so often what I see going on in training sessions, and people are there for the event, and they take the binder away, and the binder goes back, and it sits on the shelf, and there's a whole lot of application. So I think we really have to practice getting the learner to the point where they are going back and deliberately using what it is we're teaching them.
From cradle to grave, I think that's a topic that we need to constantly bring up. So when we have them in orientation and before they raise their hand, we explain to them all of the learning activities that take place across the agency, whether it's technical, core competencies, fundamental competencies. We also take them through the locations of where that training is housed so that they have at least a glimmer of an idea of where it is as they're learning so many things as they come in. We also work with the supervisors to help them understand what their roles and responsibilities are as it relates to building competencies throughout the employee's career. So it's the messaging, it's the marketing, it's getting it out there so that they recognize that it is available to them.
I think it's important that people have a mentality that this is a continuing learning process. It's not a sporadic, do it one time and be done with it. It's not, I'm finished with my college degree, let's start my career and forget about school for the rest of my life. It's the idea of having that ongoing relationship with learning and understanding that things are changing all the time, particularly in our federal workforce and the challenges that the people in the federal workforce face every day. So we've got to stay tuned in and constantly be improving our skills in learning and development.
I think part of what they really need to understand is that they can be in the driver's seat today of learning and development. They can make choices about what is interesting to them. They can ask for the kinds of learning experiences that they're interested in. They usually will develop their plans for learning in conjunction with their supervisor. They've got to think about the mission needs of the organization and how they can contribute to that mission.
I definitely think they need to understand how to learn. I think they need to understand how they best learn. I think it's important that we help employees do a better job of assessing where their learning needs are, not just what they want to learn.
I think it's really important that when they come to the learning event, that they've primed themselves. I like to call it priming the pump, so that they've thought about the topic and that they make the learning be important to them. So the better primed the person is when they come into the class, the more open they are to hearing new ideas and to being able to figure out how the information that I'm providing them ties to their existing knowledge structure.
The beautiful part about being a federal employee in this environment is there's open space to be creative. And why? Because in many cases, learning and development budgets continue to decrease. But that doesn't mean creativity needs to decrease. So employees can be very creative in kinds of learning that they want to experience in the future.
We have an EPA University SharePoint site that has a link to every single technical learning site within the agency. In my role, we manage the leadership and core competency development activities. We let the experts, the SMEs, subject matter experts, actually identify what are those skills and abilities that they need in their particular areas. At EPA, we have scientists and lawyers and areas where I am certainly not an expert, so we let them take care of that. But we link to it. So we have schools of, and there's 5 or 6 different schools that they have access to. The custom courses are all cascaded under those, and then any of the other courses that we link to through GSA or OPM are also available to them through that site. So it's a one-stop shop for them.
Intranet sites work, obviously learning management systems work as well, but we do a little bit something different as well. What we do is we take a look at our 4 or 5 different kinds of vendors, if you will, learning providers, and we work with them to create e-newsletters that's very specific about upcoming things that are taking place. So you might have 10 different webinars, but what we'll do is we will cut and paste, we'll cater the communication message to someone or some occupational series for which those classes will work.
I think in terms of recruiting, maybe the better you can define the job and also point people to information about where that person can go once they take that job, then the better likelihood you have of getting the type of employee that you're looking for who's going to be very successful in filling the role.
I think that has a lot to do with the questions that we ask people. It's if you're identifying certain behaviors or skill levels, you can ask specific questions. So if you're in a group interview process, asking about learning and development and what people do on a regular basis in order to continue to grow in their personal and their professional lives, that will give you a great indicator of what their interest is in those areas.
I think it's really important that you have curiosity, that the people that you're hiring have a genuine a love of learning and that they're willing to keep engaging with new and exciting topics. Nothing in the federal government is static, and you have to make sure you're getting employees that understand this is not rote process-oriented work day in and day out. We have challenges that as a nation we face, and our federal employees are the frontline defense for that. So they've got to be on their game, which means that they really need to be tuned into the fact that things are changing. So you want to make sure you're getting people into the federal government that have that desire to learn, that curiosity. How can we do things better? How can we do things differently? What kinds of new technologies can we take advantage of to make sure that we're providing the best service to our taxpayers?
If the federal government really talked more about career pathing for folks, help them understand how, we hire people and we don't expect them to know everything up front. That they are, one of the expectations of being, I think, an effective federal leader is that you invest in learning and you invest in learning profiles as well. So I think the government can talk about that during the recruitment effort and let people know that learning is an expectation. Have leaders talk about learning would be also a very important thing. It sets the tone for the organization that someone's going in to say, hey, we want to welcome you in, not just to do a job, but to learn a job, not just to have a skill, but to improve a skill.
We have an acquisition community of practice. We also have an evaluation or program evaluation community of practice and a supervisory community of practice that we are growing. We make sure that we are providing tools for them to plan their meeting sessions. We make ourselves available for the meeting sessions as facilitators. We try to get them engaged beyond SBA, so with other communities of practice, and just really act as champions and encourage participation.
We have actually a number of communities of practice, whether it's acquisitions or it's the science fields. The lawyers have their own groups. You have the leaders. We have a specific supervisory group that get together. They look for different learning and activities that they can engage in to help increase their competency levels. In the learning and development field, we have folks that do assessments and coaching and mentoring. So there's many fields or communities of practice within EPA.
When you're an individual, you only have access to the people who you know. But in a community of practice, you now have access to the networks that everybody in the community has access to. And that gives you power. That gives you power because it gives you knowledge and it gives you the ability to access that knowledge when you need it.
We have an interesting methodology for a community of practice because we focus on building the technical knowledge in a broad sense around the commission. And how we do that is we have something called the Commission Learning Circles. And what we do is we bring folks together periodically to offer up courses. And so these are courses that are designed and developed by employees for employees. We digitize them and we make them available for employees. And in about a 16, 18-month period of time, we did 32 courses. And so what that did is it created a library of learning, particularly on the technical side of the house.
In terms of the future, I see a workforce that is more comfortable and capable with technology in terms of doing their job and meeting customer needs. I see a group that maybe jobs are a little bit more expanded, not so segmented into specific types of roles, but maybe people have multiple roles that they're working to fulfill. And I see that hopefully the workforce of the future will have taken advantage of the ability to capture knowledge from the folks who are here that may not be here in the future and learn some things that help them just be a little bit more efficient and effective. I think the workforce of the future is going to be better educated and probably uniquely prepared for the increasing challenges that we face in the government.
And as I'm looking at learning and development, supervisors, we have a mandatory supervisory program. I'm seeing a lot more millennials that are coming into those roles, and even some Gen X that are coming into the team leader roles. So it's really exciting to see that because they're very excited about learning. They're very excited about the opportunities. And so we're talking more to them about what are those learning activities that they enjoy engaging in.
It's going to look much more nimble in terms of the kinds of jobs. Millennials and frankly some Generation X believe that career paths are no longer ladders. In fact, they're called ladders to lattice, right? They're also called Z career paths. So sort of like Zorro, you're going from one side to the other, and you're climbing, but you're not doing it in a vertical capacity. That is challenging some leadership programs that we have. Now, you can identify for any employee from any generation, here are the things you need to complete. But we also have to have this conversation to say, even though you may have completed all those things, that doesn't guarantee the next step. What it does guarantee is that you're most prepared to enter that next step, not necessarily selection for that next step.
I think we are seeing a much more skilled workforce coming in the door. At least within SBA, we're hiring many college grads. These are not folks coming in the door at a very junior level. They're coming in a little bit beyond the basic knowledge point, and they're coming in very eager, very anxious, and very ready. And so making sure that we couple that thirst for success, that thirst for advancement, with a thirst for knowledge and continual learning is important.
I came to EPA in 2000. I was told about the flood of baby boomers that were going to be leaving the federal government. That didn't happen at the time. It's been a slow process. Over the years, we've seen people retiring. But I know folks that have been with the federal government for 40 years and really love what they do and would like to continue as long as they can add value. It's interesting to see how technology has influenced the way we deliver learning and development. But also, when you talk to the different generations, there was an assumption that the Millennials and the Gen X were going to be very favorable or looking at favorably to e-learning. And I'm finding that that's not always the case, that the baby boomers are also enjoying the different types of delivery activities. So it could be classroom or e-learning or other forms. But we are trying not to put people in a box, because we look at the learning styles that each individual brings to the table and try to meet those needs.
Right now, those older federal workers, they provide us the great context of what we've tried before, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what kinds of things that may be solutions that we could employ in the future. Our younger workers bring that energy, that enthusiasm, that creativity, those new ideas that very nicely balance that context that the older generation provides. They understand the technology, they understand the comfortableness of being able to network at a global level, and they're able to bring that side to the house. So when you merge those two generations, you really do have the best of both possible worlds.
The challenge, and when we start talking about learning and development, is younger generations are interested in learning for themselves. So the question is, if I'm going to learn something, I need to know that it has application. And for younger generations, success is speed to execution. So if I can learn something quickly, I can learn it in very fast capacity, and I can apply it right away, therefore, by definition, it's good. The challenge with that is sometimes the learning that you need comes through a little bit of time and space and experience. And so, for instance, in the acquisitions area, you might learn a tremendous amount about the federal acquisition regulations, and you should and you would. But how do you apply that knowledge and skill in an environment where you're working with a cadre of senior leaders that want to execute X, Y, or Z quickly, but they want to make sure that other activities are taking place? That requires a broader strategic skill set that comes over time. I think we're in a great place in government in that we have a lot of, particularly acquisition area, fantastic young people who've got wonderful vision. But we have to have an honest conversation with them about what does it take to become a leader in that area, and it might be a little bit more time than one can anticipate coming in.
Learning in a way is like a kaleidoscope with so many options, and some of that really depends on the needs that are related to learning. I think sometimes people learn best depending on the topic, depending on the person, depending on the requirement. They may learn best by actually doing, or maybe even watching somebody do first and then do it themselves. Other times, they may learn best by maybe short bursts of learning that they have through maybe a mobile app, or maybe some information that they're reading in their learning management system, and then maybe going to a class where they can talk to people, hear a panel. Sometimes the best way to learn is by having a mentoring relationship, so that some of it depends on what the needs are as to how you actually work toward meeting them.
As far as acquisition is concerned, I think one of the best changes that I've seen recently is the creation of distance learning or blended learning for some of the longer courses. FCM 190, FAR Fundamentals, and Con 170, they're 10-day courses. And when you look at travel budgets and you look at the shrinking learning and development budgets, it becomes a heavy burden on all of the federal agencies, because these are required courses for certification. And so for those organizations that have been able to successfully stand up the distance courses, I applaud them. Because it's very much needed.
Acquisitions, we're doing a lot of e-learning, just-in-time access, because depending upon what they're working on in that moment and where they are in the organization, some of them are needing different things. As a matter of fact, I met with our acquisitions guru yesterday, and we talking about the different things that we need to do to make sure that the acquisition employees have those skills.
Every learner learns differently, right? Some people are auditory learners, some people like the hands-on, some people can sit in a lecture, some people like to read. And I think too often we assume it's a one-size-fits-all. So if you bring everybody into a traditional classroom and you expect everybody to engage actively, that's not going to work for everybody. It's going to work for some people, but not necessarily everybody else. The other thing I think becomes a challenge is when you have training that occurs 6 months before you actually use it, right? Because you forget a lot of that stuff. Or you've been doing the job for all this time through on-the-job training, and you haven't had any of the formal training to give you the context that you need. So I think as soon as training can become just in time, I need training right now, where can I get it, and is it available to me? That's what's really going to make the difference, and that's what's going to empower our employees.
I think that's probably one of the toughest jobs of folks who have this title called CLO. One of the things is you have to think of your learning opportunity like a restaurant. If you have a restaurant and you serve just one thing, you're probably not going to be in business for long. So you have to be able to provide a menu that's going to speak to different generations in different ways. I think our approach to learning begins with a conversation and data. Data, you have to do annual training needs assessments. I think most agencies want to do it. Their heart's in the right place. They may not fund it, but my position is find someone great in the IT area, help them build for you an internal needs assessment process, because you need data to help drive decisions. The other thing too is you got to have conversations to validate those decisions, and then you have to overlay them with what are the priorities of the agency and what are the priorities of the overarching industry that you're in, and make sure that your learning activities are matching the priorities of the business. One of the things that we've got to be careful of is that we let folks get excited about learning everything and there's no application for it. The challenge for all of us as leaders is to help guide what that menu could look like and open up the restaurant the right way.
I think one thing that isn't being addressed, is certainly not as well as I think people really want to see it addressed, is information for employees to understand how to grow and manage their career. I was having a conversation with somebody just the other day about how we used to have these great career maps. Everything was so clear. Everything was, in fact, most of those maps would show sort of this vertical movement. You go from step A to step B. But the workplace has really changed. And I think in today's world, I've seen a few people working in that direction to try to map out how are people really growing and advancing so others can learn, so others can follow. And we're finding the best model is not that up and down model, but it's really more of a lattice model to give people a better idea. Now, some people will just do that naturally, but I think that we may have to really help people understand how to do that better so we have more people in the pipeline.
Rotational assignments is actually something that we are just embarking upon because we do see a need from a knowledge capture, knowledge transfer perspective. We see a real need to get folks engaged in a very non-traditional learning style with one another. Learning not just what's in the book, but learning what you do. As you prepare to embark on your next adventure and close a chapter in your career, we need somebody prepared to pick that chapter up and keep going. And that isn't always something that's going to be addressed in a traditional learning format. So rotational assignments are important.
I think it's really important for people to be tied directly to the end game. So if I'm a contracting officer, if you can take me out on a ship and show me the supplies that I'm buying to support our warfighter, now all of a sudden I have a direct connection with Sally, the sailor, who needs what I'm doing. And that link between people and between functionality, I think, is extremely critical. You know, we all get overwhelmed sometimes with the amount of process, the amount of paperwork, how long it takes to get things done, both in the federal government and within private sector. But as soon as we can get ourselves tied to why am I actually providing this service? What is the mission? And to see that mission in real life, that I think is empowering to people. Now all of a sudden, when they start talking to Sally and find out what things work for her and what things don't work for her, now I can make changes in the way I'm doing my job to better support her.
We have folks come into the federal workplace. We don't talk about enough, what does the world of work look like? And so, not that we need boot camps, because those sometimes are a strong word, but we need refreshers and reminders and those kinds of things. Because what we're seeing is generational conflict taking place. And it's not because anybody is trying to do anything and they have animosity, it's the fact that there's just a lack of awareness.
Well, IT for us is like a strategic partner. In fact, our learning management system at USDA is managed by our OCIO. And I tell people that we work seamlessly together as if we were one team, as if we were reporting to the same people, because we both know that it's really critical for us to do work together to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. We use our learning management system, which is sort of the backbone of how we reach employees, to push out learning, to make suggestions to people about what they should take, to offer programming to them, to get feedback about learning. Our training evaluation is done through an IT process. So IT is a really critical part. We use it also in terms of doing webinars, because we are a large geographically dispersed organization. The day of spending money to travel people to one place to get training is disappearing very rapidly, gone in some places. But thankfully, because of IT, we can continue to do training and maybe do it better than we've ever done through IT.
One of the biggest challenges is consistency of IT infrastructure across the miles. So it's hard enough to have a consistent setup in a single location, but now you start multiplying that with a geographically decentralized workforce and making sure everybody has the right tools in the right place at the right time to be able to access this WebEx or that particular Adobe Connect session becomes a real challenge. So it's a partnership. We try very hard to keep the lines of communication open and to plan in advance.
They're partnering with us to make sure that we have the technology available. We have regions, 10 regions, but we have a lot of smaller laboratories scattered around the United States, and there may be only 3 or 4 individuals in those locations. And it's unfortunate that we can't bring them in because we don't have the travel money, but we should be able to come out to them, even if it's in a virtual way.
The learning community and the CIO community really needs to blend together. And we do. And I think in our world, what we see is that we see them as strategic partners. We recently put together an acquisition. So our other partner was the acquisition community. There were really 3 heads at the table: acquisition, learning and development, and IT. And we put together we did this, the requirements for a learning management system. I would argue in yesteryear, there wasn't as much in most agencies collaboration. There was, here are the requirements and someone's got to execute it. Well, what we did in the beginning is we listened to each other. And so we see IT as being an important strategic partner.
We have a program for developing mid-level people in leadership they're interested in leadership. In order to be in that program, they take some online learning that is specifically related to OPM competencies for people at that level. They also have a requirement to go out and shadow some leaders and to have a mentor. And we also will offer opportunities for them to get a short-term developmental detail so they can learn a little bit more and get some experience. So I think a combination, combining all of those really gives you a better rounded leadership development program.
I think what's important is making sure that we have the right tools for everybody. So for the folks who use apps, who are comfortable with apps, we have apps. For those individuals for whom classroom is important, there is no replacement for human interaction. And we cannot completely digress from getting folks together and interacting, because I think when we do that, we damage a piece of an important part of development, and that is folks' ability to interact with one another. So it's going to require a blended strategy no matter what, whether we've got a room full of millennials or a mix of folks. We have to have a blended approach.
I think where the government does a phenomenal job is that they are open to exploring a lot of different avenues with regard to learning and technology, so that they can try these pilots and see what works, and to have a smorgasbord, if you will, to allow people to take the training in the capacity and the way that they can learn best from it.
We do work hand in hand. I have done some things with the acquisition community to make sure they get some leadership development training. We need good leaders in the acquisition community. One of the things that I'm doing right now is, as I am able, I send some folks to the Partnership for Public Services leadership training program that's specific for the acquisition community, and I've also served as a mentor for some people in that program. We're partners in helping for the health and the growth of that community, which is so important to USDA.
So I'm very thankful that my ACM and I have a good working relationship. It took a little bit of time and a lot of communication to understand roles and role clarity. She has currently been very instrumental in helping us get to goal with some FACSI certifications, and it's just been amazing. So I'm thankful, but I would say to anybody that relationship between the CLO and the ACM is a critical one.
Fortunately, I have a very good relationship with our acquisition group. They are actually in our own organization. Acquisitions, facilities, HR are all in the same group. So we meet on a regular basis and talk about how can I support them to make sure that they have the learning activities. We've helped them to outline learning activities in the classroom that would be more scenario-based and not just the talking heads, if you will, so that people understand and take away more from their experiences. So it's the more we work together, the more I understand what their needs are and I can support them.
Actually, we have a very close relationship with our top folks in acquisitions, and we do that from this perspective. I believe that ensuring that the learning tools are available for folks to be effective is sacrosanct in terms of my budget. So right off the top, things that are super important, supervisory training and acquisitions training really comes right off the top. But it's not just the training experience itself, it's listening to these folks saying, hey Jeff, in addition to what we have in front of us, here's some things that we are seeing that we need some more training on and some different kinds of training. So I think we have a significant partnership, both from a strategic point of view, what do we need to do, and then from an execution point of view.
We're glad you've taken the time to experience this presentation about learning and development across generations. We look forward to the great questions you will submit for our presenters by August 31, 2017, and we'll post the answers along with this presentation. The Federal Acquisition Institute thanks Carlise Kelly, Joellen Jarrett, Sharon Ridings, Jeffrey Vargas, and Marianne Wangerman. And of course, FAI thanks you, our viewers, for your time and attention.